Okay, so in today's video, we're going to be going over the Chelsea squad composition is what I want to sort of label this video. Give us a chance to go through the squad and talk about the segments of the squad, not just the positions, but the roles of each player and sort of almost the segmented roles within a segment. So just because we've got these groups sort of set out, I think that there's sort of those subsections within those groups that we can talk about in a little bit more detail. We've of course got quite a few players that are still ready to come in next season already and sort of already being planned for in the future. And I just wanted to speak about a few of the narratives within the squad as well. So, without further ado, let's start with the goalkeepers because I think it's quite an obvious sort of thing that we've all been sort of speaking about and waiting for since the start of the season with this Chelsea team. Of course, linked with Maignan and linked with Donnarumma. Start of the season, Sanchez, in my opinion, has been fine. He got sent off against Manchester United, of course, costing us. But I do think that was sort of a string of errors from quite a few different players, not just Sanchez. Although, of course, he is at fault, and we know that he is a player that is going to have 2-3 of those mistakes per season, which is why I don't think you can challenge for a title with Sanchez. However, I do think he's steady in cup competitions. I think in terms of at his best level, I think we saw it in the Club World Cup, he can actually be a game changer. So I do think that he's fine for now, whilst I don't think this squad is within its capabilities to challenge for a title instantly, mainly because of age and experience within the squad. And we're going to speak about a little bit of that. Jorgensen, in my opinion, on the ball has some sort of good qualities in circulation, which we spoke about when we first signed him, but too many red flags. Not really, even when he is given the chance, it's just in terms of what he offers you on the ball, it's not worth the risk of what he offers you off, like without it, and sort of as a shot stopper. In terms of what we need to secure our box when we have such poor base levels of box defending, when we don't have all of our centre back options available. So yeah, Jorgensen for me, the plan is quite clearly to sort of move him on eventually. I think that they're just trying to. Obviously, they don't want to be too hasty because they spent quite a big fee on him, and he does have those sort of on-ball qualities that are looked after or looked out for in the modern era of football. So I do think eventually we'll be looking at Penders coming into that conversation. Now, whether that's next season straight away, as I do think he still needs quite a bit of development. Of course, there's some really, really good signs, and I love the Strasbourg move for him. I do wonder if whether another season at Strasbourg after this one could be the move, rather than bringing him back here to basically be an understudy again to Robert Sanchez, or you bring in another guy who's going to be ahead of him anyway, like a Mike Maignan on a free. So I do think no matter what, with that squad situation, I do think Penders next year would probably be, unless he's going to literally be thrust into the deep end, which could bring its own problems upon us anyway, him being the number one next season. I do think another year being the number one at Strasbourg, whilst they're hopefully, if they fight for Europe again this season, it's looking good at the minute. If they can get another European season under his belt, playing in Ligue 1, competitive league, I do think it could be the best for him. So we're going to leave him here for now, but I do think Sanchez is fine this season. Let's see what happens in terms of do they look to bring in someone like Mike Maignan on a free as a bridge to Penders just for a 1 year if they think this. I think it all depends on how they think the squad is set up to compete next season, whether they think we're ready for a title at that point, because at some point you do have to pull the trigger, of course. But that's sort of where we are with the goalkeeper position. Central or centre-back profiles, and I think that there's a few different ones that we need to talk about here. So as you can see, I've got sort of the subsection within this of those sort of central centre-back profiles that we spoke about at the start of the season so heavily. Those almost tempo setters who, on the ball, they're going to sit sort of within a 3 in here, and they're going to look to sort of spray those passes in between the lines, have that ability to sort of go both ways, not get caught, but also circulate play at like a good base level and know the moment and when to pick the moment to sort of progress play and when to circulate the ball. So I think Colwell, of course, he's injured. He's the main one. Tosin probably has the closest skill set in terms of on-ball qualities in terms of that with Colwell. However, again, I think Tosin, we've seen quite a few times, has a few of those sort of 1v1 defending issues, especially when he's looking to be on the back foot and he's looking to sort of stop those players. He allows players to take his space a little bit easier than someone like Colwell. Then what I would say is, especially with Wes and a Chempong, you almost have another subset. Now, Chalobah could be he's closer to this than the others. But you have sort of that other subset, if we just do this, of very aggressive, sort of wide centre-back profiles. Now, yes, Acheampong has played in that central centre-back role, and I think that that's because of needs must at times. But we saw Badiashile and Acheampong sort of both playing just as those nominal centre-backs against Liverpool, which worked really well. But I think what you get with Fofana and Acheampong is you get those natural, they're ridiculously good carriers on the ball, and they can strive you forward with that progressive carrying, sorry. So if we sort of move this into somewhat what a team, like just in and around what like a usual sort of back three would have looked like within this squad, what often is given to the team is space to carry into here and here. And I think with Wes and somebody like Josh Acheampong as well, what you have, and we saw it even when he was playing with a two against Liverpool, is that ability to carry the ball forward. Again, ignore the names at this point, just sort of think about the shape. What you get is that ability to, if they win the ball back like he did against Isaac, he can sort of spring that ball forward himself via carrying. That's sort of something that Josh gives you. They're aggressive centre-backs. They can also be aggressive off the ball because they have the pace and power to recover backwards as well into those channels. So what they give you is they can jump really high. And again, if you've got the right sort of combination of centre-backs where one can sort of cover and one can jump, then it's really good. That's why Cole and Fofana for me was like a good sort of pairing at the time of last season when it worked and when it was sort of when they were fit because of that. And it's something that I do want them to build on upon time. But again, with Josh maybe being another option to pair with Colwell over time, he can do that. He can jump out. He's extremely durable in the duels. Really sort of compact, but like I mean, he's ridiculous. He's 6'5". He's got a ridiculous frame. Carries the ball like a gazelle. There's just so many ways that you could describe Josh Acheampong, and he is sort of within that frame of being a Wesley Fofana with even more sort of special qualities in terms of his frame and his almost on-ball ability to maneuver tight spaces. Acheampong is ridiculously special. Badiashile, I think he's sort of a mixture of a lot of different things. I think he's got the pauser on the ball. I don't necessarily think he's got the same level of disguise as someone like Adarabioyo or Colwell in that central centre-back role. But I do think especially how I've been using him lately in a two, where he can sort of be in that left centre-back role in this sort of zone that probably suits him better on the ball. But he can also step up a bit. He can manipulate the ball. He can use that pauser, and he can use quite a few different things that he's good at. I think he's a very good profile to have as well. And then Chalobah, similar. I think he can sort of be somewhat within that role, but also somewhat within just that sort of nominal right centre-back position. So he's sort of within those two sort of subsets. In terms of for the rest of the season, in terms of a back four, I do think this could be the way forward. Now, the problem is I spoke about this in the player ratings video the other day with Matisse. I do think the issue is with someone like Wes, having him in there, you are so open to injuries, and that can sort of really knock you off your course of sort of building that stability. So maybe you look to build with it being Chalobah and Badiashile purely for that reason, and you sort of give Fofana the Champions League games, the cup games, and you make sure that you sort of are really careful with him before you throw him into trying to sort of make a back four. I think this one would maybe be a little bit more stable in terms of trying to build, but I don't know why I've got them on the wrong sides. Whoops. But I think that could be the way forward in terms of a back four, just to sort of build that stability. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Of course, it could also be Acheampong because we've seen Badiashile and Chalobah, Badiashile and Acheampong play really, really well against Liverpool. I'm just unsure if Maresca will sort of really throw him into the deep end, but I do want to see him getting a lot of minutes because I think he absolutely deserves it and he is ridiculously special. Moving on to sort of the versatile fullback group. Now, I think within this group, you could almost subset Hato because he can be sort of almost what Fofana and Acheampong are in here, right? He has the qualities to be that sort of aggressor left centre-back, and it's what we've seen him do when he has played as a centre-back. He can carry the ball really well sort of from that left centre-back position, like we said here, where he can carry it on the outside of a block. So he can sort of go into there, which is why he can be almost a subset in that fullback group. But the reason that sort of this whole group is almost just a group in itself is, again, they're versatile fullbacks. They're tactical platformers is what I like to call them a lot of the time, because they can play in these zones in the half spaces. They can play in the pivot. They can play as a wide centre-back. They can play in the nominal fullback positions, which we've been seeing lately, which I really like. But they can also occupy width. And if you just look at the amount of boxes there, they can occupy so, and I mean that's not even sort of giving the wide centre back positions. They can occupy so many different zones on the pitch. It allows Maresca to sort of make changes based on that. And Cucurella and James are just perfect examples of it. Because in this recent role where they've been starting as these nominal fullbacks, as a left back and a right back, the runs they can make is they can invert and sort of become this sort of three in the middle with Fernandez pushed on like this. Let's get rid of all that. They can then sort of, Fernandez can make that rotation here, and you can have him higher up in the pocket. Again, I've got Cole in there, but he's not been there recently. But the idea is as well, is that let's say Cucurella stays here, he shifts over, and you got Fernandez in here. And for example, then James pushes forward, Esteval comes inside, as an example. James can then occupy this width at times, which we spoke about as a really good role for him. But he doesn't have to do the same continuous tracking back and forth because the rotations allows him to get into this position on one-off occasions, but then resettle and sort of settle on in the game in this position where he's got a little bit less workload. So those tactical platformers, I don't think anything needs to be done within that sort of group. I think that the fullback group is just so well balanced. I think if you sort of over time, and you've got a Chempong who can sort of do that role. He's that right back, centre back hybrid, but I think he's just sort of started to play a little bit more as that centre back because of his frame. But there's just so much to like about that fullback group that I am just very happy with it as it is. The one thing you could maybe speak about is, could you get in a width holder on the left who's maybe a little bit more natural in that sort of high width area to put crosses into the box and be that player, like someone like Diego Moreira from Strasbourg is somebody that a lot of people have thought about bringing back to be that sort of versatile player. I don't think it will happen because I think you've already got such a good group and it'd be tough to give him the minutes that he needs. But that's one to sort of keep an eye on. Of course, you've got Antwi in the coming through the ranks as well. You got Landon Emanalo, who can play as that left back and be a little bit more sort of Hato-esque or Cucurella in that sort of left centre back position and sort of hybrid from that left back. So you've got plenty of options. So I think that that's okay. Moving on to the centre mid sort of group. So much to talk about in this group. You've got Caicedo, right? Caicedo is just Caicedo. He is a ball-winning midfielder who can sort of control the tempo. He can do a bit of everything. And he is the sort of metronome of the team in terms of he will always be in and around there. Like, he's sort of an anchor in this team of where he stays. He can push forward on the carry if he needs to. We saw his goals this season coming in clutch. He can circulate play. He can move in and around. He can sort of track deep to try and defend sort of on the counter. Now, he does have some issues when he's defending on the back foot. He's much better sort of from this position jumping up to defend. But Caicedo is just ridiculously good. So I think he's sort of like one of those players that you just have to leave. And the team is built around sort of those dynamics of how you have him in the team. Asugo, in a similar light, is basically just the backup to Caicedo. So you have Caicedo, and then you have Asugo, who his role is to give you Caicedo-esque abilities, whether you want two of them at the back end of a game as a closer, whether you want to rest Caicedo and have Asugo do that job. That's what he's sort of within the squad for. So that's their two roles sort of ironed out. Then what I think you have is two almost specialist midfielders. Lavia, that press-resistant DM, who can literally just, if he's the one in this position, you can just vacate the areas, because even if these guys are pushed really high on that side and these two are really split, of course, if you lose the ball, you're so open because you've got space there. These guys have got longer sort of areas to track. These players are sort of looking to receive in the pocket, so they're not as close to sort of Lavia in the pivot either. But because of how quality he is, and it's almost like he's just got a 360-degree perception when he's in these areas on the turn. He's so press resistant, so good at progressing play. He's also good at screening the defense in those areas, to the point where he's a specialist in that role. And again, it's one of those ones where if that's what you need, and in certain games it 100% is. I think we are so much better progressing play in a little bit more of a rigid system when Lavia is in the team, because it doesn't matter how rigid we are, because he will open those angles himself by sort of almost he'll sort of knock the ball this way himself to open up a passing angle into here. He's got that ability to open his own angles and play with that press resistance that he has. Enzo Fernandez, just an all-rounder, a high IQ all-rounder is what I'd sort of describe him as. Yes, he's been used more as that sort of box crasher in this role, but what I love about the new sort of formation that we're seeing a little bit more of recently, um, is that he has this sort of ability now where this whole side of the pitch is almost his to sort of play with, because he can drop in and be um, that secondary ball progressor, which allows him to get really good usage in one of his best roles to sort of play from deep, and you can use that deep passing range that you've got, ability to progress the ball into these players. And again, he's got runners like Cucurella who can now occupy this zone if Fernandes drops into here. So he can now also play that sort of ball over the top, sort of play it into Cucurella, who's running on. He's got Garnacho now on that side of the pitch with him as well. A lot of good dynamics for Enzo Fernandes to work within, but also can still sort of use that high IQ movement where he can. And these are the sort of players you want in your team if you're going to try and play with a more fluid version of football where you have lots of rotations, because Fernandes understands the triggers on when to make those rotations and when to stay fixed. We saw it against Liverpool to hugely good effect, dragging Ryan Gravenberg out, allowing Cucurella to sort of get in behind him, create those 2v1s with Garnacho on the left. That's why you want Fernandes in those high IQ moments to be the one sort of orchestrating those moves, because he understands why he's doing it. He's not just doing it for the sake of it. So Fernandes, yeah, high IQ technician who offers a lot of different things and can be a lot of different things for the team. Santos, the reason I've just sort of had him sort of there is I think, again, he's a bit more of an all-rounder in the sense that he can do a bit of everything. If you want him to do Casado's role, he can. If you want him to do Fernandez's role, he can. If you want him to do Lavia's role, in my opinion, he actually can. He's got that ability. Now, has he had a few rusty moments? Yes. Does he need to sort of improve? Like, I mean, I think he's been really good apart from that mistake, really, against who was it against? Brighton, that led to the red card. So it's an interesting one to sort of analyse. But Santos, in my opinion, he's the perfect other midfielder to have within this group, because you've got a few specialists. You've got sort of a clear backup to the main guy who's going to get all the minutes in the midfield. And then you've got someone who can do a bit of everything depending on the game style and what you want to do with the team. If you want to go for a really physical midfield three, Santos, Lavia, Casado, for example, and you still have somebody who can crash the box and be a little bit more of an Enzo, but in a more physical light. If you want to go for a double pivot, Lavia's injured, and you've got Santos and Casado. Santos can do a little bit of Lavia's role, but also do a little bit of Casado's role if he pushes on. They have a little bit of that yin and yang in there. If they play together, it can be done. So I do think that Santos offers you just a lot of versatility in a lot of different ways. He's almost your sort of all-phaser. Now let's speak about the outlet runners. I think Garnacho more so, but he can sort of be that outlet runner in behind somebody, and we need these runners in attack. If you've watched an old video that I made about runners and sort of ball to feet players, you need these players that can stretch the pitch. So Garnacho is absolutely one of them. He's a guy who can stretch the pitch, go in beyond, and really allow the ball to feet players to have a little bit more space to occupy. So even like we'll get on to the likes of João Pedro, but Palmer, Esteval, Fernandes even. Those players that want the ball to feet in the middle of the park and need that space to open up in these channels here. You need those players to stretch the pitch in order to create that space for you in this area. So that's more so what Garnacho's role is within this team. Less touches, more influence with off-ball movement, and arriving to be sort of the one finishing off moves, or at least sort of setting up almost like the second to last touch, whether he's sort of getting a 1v1 on this side of the pitch, getting to the byline, like 2-3 touches in and across the box, zips it across the box and makes something happen. That's sort of Garnacho's role in this team. Fewer touches. Same with Neto. Now, it's not currently his role because he's actually playing on the right, getting more touches. And by the way, ignore that Gittins is on the right. It's more about just sort of splitting them into roles rather than where they're on the pitch. Neto playing more on the right. And I think where Cole Palmer's not in the team currently, and Esteval's sort of, he's still finding his feet in terms of how much he can play. Neto is actually the Chelsea player getting the most touches in the final third for Chelsea. So I think that it doesn't quite fit his role yet. But eventually, I think what you want Neto to be is you want him to be less touches. You want him to be in behind. Now, yes, you can use him in different ways to get those crosses into the box. But you want him to be that sort of, doesn't need as many touches to influence a game, because even if he is having a lot of touches, he's not really influencing the game in that sort of way that you want him to. Gittins on this side of the pitch, this is sort of our 1v1 demon area of the pitch, sort of like subset or category. That's what you want Gittins to be. Now, Esteval can be this as well, because what you have is you have two wingers who can create chances off the dribble. They can create shots for themselves off the dribble. Now, Esteval is the reason he's in a subset in here with Cole is because I think he's a high touch, high influence player, a lot like Cole. I think they're both your sort of, these two players in here are the ones that you want getting the most touches on the ball. But Esteval doesn't mean with Esteval that he can't be something else. Now, if Cole's going to be that sort of primary touch taker and the one who's really sort of drawing players towards him and really being the creator, Esteval can be a little bit more of an efficient, if you want him to, he can be that one who gets in behind and does things 1-2 touch and be a bit more efficient, sort of scoring the goals. He can also be the high-end touch creator. He can be the 1v1 sort of demon type, where he's going to isolate his man and make something happen from those areas. He's a lot of different things, Esteval. So that's why he's sort of in a high volume usage sort of subset category, but he could be a bit of everything. Buonanotte, I've just sort of put him in this role because I think he's just what I've called them is like a filler. And I think João Pedro is kind of this, but to a far higher level. João Pedro is like, he's our hybrid player. He can be, for me, he's very well suited to being a false nine when we play against back fours, but he's also very well suited to being the number 10 when we play against back fives. And he's in there to serve a purpose. He can play lots of different roles. He can play lots of different ways. Much like Buonanotte, he's a bit of just a service player to sort of service those around you. He can be ball to feet. He can sort of stretch in behind if you really want him to. He is a little bit more ball to feet, especially when playing in the number 9. He wants to drop in and sort of form the top of this pentagon that we always talk about. So if we talk about the wingers being high and wide, you talk about sort of 2 being inverted in the middle of the park like this. Then what we'd sort of have is the 2 wide players there, 2 number 8s in there, top of the pentagon, and it would almost form like this. Very well drawn pentagon. But that's what Pedro wants to do against back fours, but against back fives, it doesn't work to that same effect because you need this striker group. Now, just to sort of clarify where everybody's at, I think Paez eventually takes this role. I think Penders eventually takes this role and eventually takes the starting role as the goalkeeper. Whether that's sooner rather than later, we'll see. So Paez is sort of going to be that almost facilitator, but he can also be that high volume. So again, he's almost a subset in himself to playing in lots of different roles. Neto and Garnacho, I think, remain that sort of type. I think Kenda becomes a little bit more of what Gittins is. Now, again, he's more of a creator for me, Kenda, in terms of his passing ability, but he can also be the guy to sort of square a man up and create from that moment. So you want to give him plenty of 1v1s as a touchline winger. Maybe not the highest volume of the team, but a little bit higher than, say, your like Garnachos and Netos, who are sort of arriving on that back line and sort of looking to be that one or last sort of 2 players to touch the ball. So that's where Kenda would sort of come into things. Anselmino, I don't think will come into things straight away. I mean, he's had injuries. We need to see how he sort of adapts. Had a really good game for Dortmund when he first joined, but again, injuries are going to sort of be a reason as to why we probably don't see him, at least until he sort of figures that out. Satpayev, I think he'll be a loan straight to somewhere like Strasbourg. Omega, we're going to talk about within this striker group. And Saar, I do think will sort of be part of this team because I think one of these guys will leave, whether it's Chalobah, whether it's Fofana. And I think Saar takes their spot within that group. So I do think that Saar will join that sort of centre-back unit next season. Which brings us on to the attacking unit. Now, what we've got at the minute, the reason I've got George in the striker is 1, that's because that's where he's being used. But 2, I think the reason Maresca's using him there is because he wants somebody who can stretch him behind, like we spoke about with Garnacho on this side of the pitch. So you could even put him in this group of being sort of a last line, not as many touches, but to affect the game on the last line with the last touches of the ball. Got the ball striking to do it. However, I do think he'll be sold. So it's not too worth going into that much detail about him. Guiu, I think he could actually have quite a big part to play in these next few games, sort of against back fives, especially against Wolves, is one that I've sort of earmarked for Guiu to start up front with Pedro starting the 10. But we'll see what happens. But he's almost to give you a little bit of what Delap gives you. A box and a last line bully is sort of how I'd sort of speak about Delap. He puts his body about, he throws his weight around, he's in and around the box, he's occupying multiple defenders, and even if he's not the one benefiting from it, he's carving open space for a lot of these other players that we want to get the space and want to have time on the ball, which will in turn increase the shot volume of this team. Now, we're going to go over a sort of season review. That's coming out on Thursday, so I won't go into the actual stats of it. But shot volume has been a bit of a problem, and I do think that it's largely down to the attacking, sort of how the team lines up, but from the front backwards. I think that how we're having to line up front is really affecting the unit behind it, and how we sort of generate shots from there. So that shot volume is a thing, and we'll talk about that on Thursday in that video. But I think Delap as that sort of last line box bully will give us that a little bit more, and gives us a lot of different ways to beat not only a high line playing over the press and being a bit more direct, which we really want to add to our game to give us more sort of layers, but he also gives you sort of a little bit more ability against the low block to go more sort of into the box with crosses and sort of play off of him. We saw it against West Ham. There was a ball fizzed into him where sort of you have the likes of Esteval who can play off him, João Pedro can play off him, and it allows that little bit more space to develop. So let's say Guiu as well goes next season. Omega, he's the last one that I wanted to speak about. Now, we are going to make a video about him soon when I have the time. It will just be, again, we've got a bit of time with Omega because we, at least until January, we don't know if he's going to join then. Probably won't even join until summer if we're sort of being more realistic. But let's see what happens with him. But I think the whole point of bringing him in is much like Jackson. You're looking here at someone who's an XG generator, and that's sort of how I'd categorize him. So you could even sort of make him his own little subset within this. He's a guy who's going to run on that last line. So he's going to be a bit of a mixture of other players. He's going to run and be aggressive in the last line. He wants to do a lot of his work inside the box. Now, yes, he drops in and out of the box to sort of create space for others. He's intelligent with his movement to do that. But the main thing that he's good at is, even if it's not always going to be converted, he will cause chaos in and around the box. He's 6'5". He's got a really unique frame, long legs. He's going to put himself in areas that's going to force mistakes in the box, force pressure for other defenders, where he almost needs to be double teamed in a similar way to Delap in that sense. But he's going to get into those areas to score goals on a consistent basis, which will not only help to create more shots for other players because of the space and sort of the attention that he's going to take up inside the box, but it's also going to help to score more simple goals that don't take as much really high level quality, like sort of those balls into the box and he's just sort of sniffing it out and getting on the end of it and sort of turning it into a goal. Now, are we going to be frustrated by someone like Omega? I do think so, because in a little bit similar to Garnacho, because I think he's sort of similar, a similar type of sort of XG generator, but from wide. They get a lot of chances. They also do miss a lot of chances. And that comes with it because they create so many chances for themselves with their movement and being really clever and being really relentless as to how often they want to get in that area to score goals, that they are more susceptible to missing. Now, am I saying Omega's going to be a starter for Chelsea? No, but I do think he's going to be quite a key addition to bring, like I say, more simple goals that look simple to us because of how easily it sort of happens, but it isn't as simple as it made out, because I think that these XG generators, and I sort of almost put it in with the likes of an Ekatike or a who's another good example, Voltamada, maybe, those sort of players that I had them grouped with as these XG generators. They make low XG chances look high XG, and they turn those low XG chances into high XG chances. And I think that that's something and someone that is important to have in the squad. And I think Jackson gave you that. So I do think it's important to replace Jackson with someone who can offer similar qualities. So I think that's it in terms of the squad composition. Let me know your thoughts on this entire squad, what you'd like to see in the future. If this was the squad going into next season, like I say, with Paez, Omega, Sarr sort of joining the group, where would you invest the money within this squad to improve it? We're going to speak on Thursday, in Thursday's video, a little bit more about the actual season so far, and like I said, a few of the stats like the shot volume, the rest defense, a few different things that we've noticed, and sort of go into a bit more detail on the team. But in today's video, it's more about the squad composition and how we are happy with their roles and what each player is sort of in the squad to do with that purpose. So it's been a bit of a long one, about half an hour. Please do drop a like, subscribe, leave a comment. Like I say, let me know your thoughts on the squad, where you'd spend the money and all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys in the next one.